Hey there, ladies. I think these sessions just keep getting better and better. This has already been an amazing day of programming. So, welcome back. Our next session is called Sisters on the Rise: The Challenges and Successes of Women of Color Founders. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our sponsors for this session. That is Bumble and Div Inc. I happen to sit on the founders circle of Div Inc., and I am incredibly impressed with the work that they've done and with Preston himself, who I think had a hand in helping us put this panel together. So I am going to introduce our moderator for the day, Janice Omedeki. She is the CEO of the Mentor Method. So Janice, over to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Janice Omedeki, CEO and founder of the Mentor Method. We're an enterprise SaaS platform that makes workplaces more inclusive through diverse and inclusive mentorship. I'm excited to be leading today's panel and moderating with four dynamic women who have been inspiring and leading the charge in several areas of the entrepreneurial journey. Given the current climate and starting a business, scaling a business, and staying focused under such high level of both conscious and subconscious duress, that can be very challenging. The world is highlighting stances on anti-racism and those who don't share those views as well. And sometimes it can seem as though the world is becoming a larger and larger uphill battle on top of trying to create a business. So for today's panel, our goal is to inspire and motivate dynamic women and allies watching this panel to understand the challenges of being a founder and woman of color and how you can amplify the voices of diverse founders. So some key takeaways will include fundraising advice, how to overcome barriers when creating your business, and paths to pivot or expand during COVID. I'm excited to introduce our esteemed panelists. We have Zawadi Bryant, who is the CEO of Nightlight Pediatrics. The tagline is "Your Night Made Brighter." April Dominguez, CEO and co-founder of Handsome, which is the LinkedIn for the beauty industry. Rima Ahmad Falala, the CEO and founder of Thawra Network, which can be described as Arabic for revolution, and it transforms the mental health outcomes of millions of Arabs and Muslims through identity-affirming media content. And lastly, one of my favorite people in the startup scene, Dr. Roshana Novelis, who is the CEO and founder of Enrich Her, a deeply engaging network of women-led business owners. And her rapidly growing community provides tactical support and guidance and provides unique access to business financing. Welcome, and thank you for attending. So let's get into the first question. Rima, I was really struck during our introduction call to get this panel organized. I was really struck by your story and the core mission of your business. You mentioned this invisible identity as an Arab American and not being on the census. And I would love for you to share what you shared with us on that call in terms of how this impacts your founder mindset and journey.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you all. So I talked about being an Arab American and how we're invisible on applications like the US Census, but then hyper visible in negative ways, often in American media. And so that is a personal, a problem that affected me personally, but as I grew up and talked to other Arabs in my community, as well as across the nation, we learned that this is an issue that affects our mental health outcomes. It affects our way of just existing in the world. And so Thawra really seeks to create a counterforce. We're not really trying to convince people to see us for who we are. We're more so trying to talk to our community and kind of provide the platform that we needed growing up and still need in a lot of ways. And it's been challenging specifically as a founder because with this invisible identity, we're finding ourselves having to educate while we're also trying to invest people in the problem and in our solution. So any pitch looks like a really strategic balance between doing both, having to kind of get a lot of people to understand that this is an issue that people experience, millions of people experience day to day in America, while also convincing them, like any normal founder, that we have a viable business model as well.
Mm-hmm. I remember that well. When I started the mentor method 4 years ago, diversity and inclusion wasn't a very popular topic. Neither was mentorship. And so I remember that delicate balance of my first slides, especially of having to explain diversity and inclusion and how they're different. So I completely understand that. And thank you. That's incredible work. And I can't wait to be a community supporter.
Thank you.
So I know that there's been an adjustment with COVID, and I'd like for us to unpack your biggest aha moments about your businesses, especially this year, and what you've been able to do now that you're not working in person. So April, I'd love to start with you. How have you been able to grow your business organically during COVID? And what are some tips you've learned during this time frame when it relates to raising capital as a brown female founder?
Yeah, those are great questions. And just thank you for having me. Super excited to be here with you all. Such a dynamic panel of female founders. And it's just an honor to be able to honestly talk about these things because I think they're really important topics for female founders. For me, I really had in the beginning that my first aha moment was recognizing when COVID hit that I had already been in the founder seat for 2 years. I had already been working from home for 2 years. I had already been riding those waves of uncertainty for 2 years. And so when COVID hit, it really was this aha moment of, wait, you're ready. You've been preparing for this. Let's go. You can keep going. And I think that's something that founders should really look at more often is how prepared they really are because we're in such a volatile work environment all the time. Things are always going wrong, And so for me, that was the first aha moment of I was really prepared to go after this. And in terms of your question of how we continued to grow during COVID, we made a very rapid decision to stop fundraising. We recognized that the fundraising market was the landscape. You weren't going to be able to tell what was going to happen. So we decided to focus all of our efforts and all of our energy on things that we could control. And so that was refining our push messages. That was cold calling. I mean, we dialed 500 schools in the state of Texas or in the state of California, doing everything that we could as founders in order to help grow our business. And in result of that, we actually grew our average weekly interactions by over 600% throughout COVID. And I would really attribute it to the fact that we stopped focusing on fundraising and focused entirely on what we could do with our own hands.
Congratulations. That's a big jump.
Thank you.
And not an easy feat. Roshana, I actually want to pivot to you because I love the mission behind Enrich Her. I love that you're empowering women. I've been seeing a lot of articles and studies that are showing because of the unemployment increase and people seeking paths to either generating revenue or some path to income, that women are creating more businesses. So with this influx of unemployment and seeking new opportunities, how has that impacted Enrich Her?
It's funny because women, especially Black women, have been the number one group that starts new businesses in this country for a while. So it was about 1,821 per day, but no one believed it. So many people told me, hey, women don't need any help. They don't need any money because if they need, they would just get it. So just like you, Janice, when 4 years ago, you're explaining the difference between diversity and inclusion, like the biggest thing now is more people, I would say, understand that women need financial support, Black entrepreneurs need financial support, and it's not a strange thing, so it might be their favorite, stylist, like the people that April serves, has been impacted. So people have more of a real world connection to women business owners in their lives, which I don't understand how they didn't before. But that being said, it's been a lot easier getting different organizations and entities to support what we're doing. And I'm really just grateful that this time has kind of highlighted our work and it's rallying others to put their support, not only education, but financial support behind a similar mission to what we have.
That's fantastic. And Roshana, I actually remember us pitching in 2018 during South by Southwest, and we both had those early stage pitches of having to explain the market. So I'm excited that you're still gaining traction and just being a leading resource for women business owners.
Thank you. That was fantastic. I'm glad we met on the stage in South by Southwest.
Rima, I want to circle back to you. How has COVID motivated you to pivot your business? You discussed switching to a virtual model because of your community building focus. So how has that been going for you?
Yeah, so our number one media platform called the Dearborn Girl Podcast, which chronicles the narratives of Arab and Muslim women in the Dearborn, Michigan community. Our most successful events before COVID were obviously in person. We sold out 3 of our in-person events, and if anyone knows anything about the Arab community, they love getting together, eating, staying for longer than we probably planned for them to stay. And so we were really sad because we had a few events planned. But I think what COVID taught us is just that community is community, regardless where it is and how it's done. And we actually are at 5 times our user base now that we've switched to focusing on social media. We launched a TikTok channel, and we all know how the kids act on TikTok and how that's going. So it's been amazing to just see that people are going to gravitate towards spaces, whether they're digital or in person. And we've really been able to talk to our user in a way that we probably weren't before, and in a more personal, I guess, ongoing, sustainable way. And we know that when things open back up and we do in-person events, people will be anxiously attending them when things are safe.
Now, Rima, I actually have a follow-up question for you, because this shift in the virtual model, right? Most people are now looking at, say, TikTok or community building virtually.
Right.
So how did you build your strategy? Did you try it for just like a month? Did you have certain metrics you were tracking? Give us some pages in your playbook.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend I'm super buttoned up with it yet. And that's a goal that we have, is really getting clear on what our metrics are, because they're there for us to peel back and reveal. But I think we just talk to people a lot. We've done over 100 customer discovery calls with people in our community, not just locally, but even across the nation, and ask some pretty general questions to understand really what is it that they're looking for when they attend one of these events, or when they become a member on our website. We launched our website earlier, and we've just had a lot of really interesting insights to look at. And so I think it's less about people buying a ticket and coming to an event, and more about their engagement over time and what that looks like. So hopefully when I'm on one of these panels in a couple of years, we'll have a better way of tracking those insights. But I think, I guess, to summarize my response, is just how people are feeling entering your space. And that feeling can be created, whether it's in person or them looking at posts and finding resonance in that content. And that's something specifically for our user that they don't really find anywhere, and we're able to provide consistently.
Thank you for giving us a peek behind the curtain.
Thank you.
Zawadi, you have grown your business bootstrapped to $11 million without venture funding. I feel like I should just stop talking there and just let you speak for the next 30 minutes. I have so many questions. The big one first is how? How did you do that? When did you get started? How did you get your bootstrap funding? Just tell us everything, please.
Sure. So we started the business about 13 years ago. And me and my partners, we dug deep. We dug into personal savings, as well as we had some we had some family that could also sow into our business. We also were very fortunate to get an SBA loan. And I know that's really hard for some people to do in certain industries, but fortunately I'm in healthcare, and it's not as big of a hurdle to get financing through the bank when you have a healthcare business. And so our initial location was built based on our savings, at getting help from family, as well as an SBA loan. And fortunately, our second location, we actually received a grant from one of the health plans in our region to help us get started, because they were looking for partners to reduce the number of the amount of ER utilization. And so they received a federal grant, and we were a recipient of some of those funds. So I would just encourage people, we didn't go the venture capital route or the private equity route, although we're looking at that right now. But initially, We like I said, we, relied on our savings, friends, family, SBA loans, as well as grants. So I think, just being creative, and getting the money where it is, wherever you can find it, maybe going a less traditional route is the route we took.
Now, I know questions that I used to get early on when I would discuss non-traditional funding sources was great, but when you Google that, there are thousands of pages that you could access. Were there some resources that you found particularly helpful to identify grants and other non-equity funding opportunities?
Yeah, two things. In regards to like the SBA, I stayed at the SBA building here in Houston, and I went to a million different SBDC workshops, and all of that was free. And so I like the word free. So I went to as many workshops as I could, networked with as many people as possible, and just built up my skill set and asked a lot of questions. It wasn't easy. We went through several different SBDC counselors until we found the right one that understood our business model, that acted like they cared about us getting financing. So we went through that whole cycle until we found a good fit. And then secondly, in regards to networking, we talked to everyone. Everyone knew about our business, from our former employers to people in health plans. We called them, we talked to them about our business plan. And so when the time came for the grants to be available, we had already made those contacts and connections, and it was just a natural fit. And so it wasn't anything we had planned on. Actually, we didn't even know about the money, but we had pitched our business so much to this health plan that they naturally saw it was a great fit and called us to see if we were interested in the free money. And we said, yes, of course.
And how has COVID impacted business? I mean, 11 million, I'm assuming doing well, but please let us know how COVID is impacting healthcare and telehealth for you.
Yeah, so it's been a challenge because, in March, no one was coming to the doctor's office. So one of the things I would encourage founders to do is to always think several steps ahead. And so because we had been doing telehealth for 2 years at that point, it was just a logical, easy switch for us to make to move our visits from in-clinic to telehealth. And so, we made that adjustment. We also had already started talking to some of the health plans and payers in regards to moving closer to a value-based model of payment versus a, fee for service, how it traditionally is in medicine. And so I think, when we position ourselves to, go beyond what the current status quo is, we position ourselves to, weather the storm of some of these crises and blips in the road that we didn't anticipate. And so that's been really helpful for us, to already be involved in telehealth as well as testing. We're doing COVID testing. We're doing a lot of that. We're staying on the forefront of that as that continuously evolves. So as a founder, you always have to have your nose, your ear to what's going on, because it's constantly changing right now in this environment with COVID.
I want to ask a follow-up question to all of our panelists, and hopefully two of you can respond to this, but I'm noticing a pattern with all of us being ahead of the curve, ahead of the market, and now during this climate, we're seeing more traction and traffic and sort of the aha moments from the market that we had 4 to 13 years ahead of time. So as people are starting new businesses, I'm sure we all remember having multiple paths and things that we were trying to consider, whether it was features or market or what have you. So with this new opportunity of innovation within COVID, what advice do you have for early stage women-led businesses to pick one path and stick with it? And how did you actually make those decisions early on in your businesses?
I'll jump in. So, the way that I think about it is that when we started Handsome, It had a fundamental root issue that we were trying to solve. It's very mission driven. There is this core ingredient of community that is lacking in the beauty industry. And as a result of that, they don't have proper tools, education, digital resources. And so for us, because we are a mobile device and we are a mobile app, in the early days, you really honestly, as an early founder, do have to pretty much throw spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks. That's what your job is. You're trying to find product market fit. But I think that in regards to your question, Janice, it's all about but how do you stay so focused and always bring it back to this root cause or this problem that you're trying to solve? And so I think that for me, my advice to early stage founders would be, identify that root cause. Identify the root problem that you're trying to fix. Make sure that it's tied to a vision, tied to a mission, and then the different pathways in which you get there. You have to test them. You have to iterate, and you have to learn how to do it very, very capital efficiently and very quickly. But it is going to take a lot of spaghetti that you're essentially throwing at the wall to see what works.
And then I'll jump in as well. A lot of times we understand what the problem is. And so when I used to get feedback that hey, women don't need any money, this isn't a real issue, this is a waste of time. And then I thought about all of you, all these amazing women that I know that don't have access to enough capital. And I had to really believe that I was right. I was right that we need more resources. And so a lot of times we grow up and we put certain people on pedestals that have maybe made a lot of money or are very high regarded, but they have no clue about what you're trying to solve for. And so this entrepreneurship journey has definitely been a journey in self in terms of focusing on what I believe, focusing on what my ideal customers are telling me that they need, and kind of leaving the people who don't understand by the wayside. And so that's what it really is, because there are a lot of people who aren't going to get what you do, maybe most people, but that's okay. There's a small subset of people, which may be $1 billion industry, who are demanding, what you need. Secondly, is that most people are not early adopters. Early adopters are on the very beginning of that curve for using different products and skills. I remember I started using Airbnb in 2012, and almost everyone I knew thought I was crazy. Now, if you say, oh, I'm going to go into Airbnb, that's not even a big deal. So, you have to know who you're speaking with and go from there.
Thank you. And that's actually a great segue into my next series of questions. According to DocSend's pre-seed research, all male teams raised 42% more than all female teams in their pre-seed round. Furthermore, all female teams raised 30% less money after contacting 23% more investors than their male teams. Similar can be said for sales and revenue. So when you're either approaching sales, so Zawadi, you mainly bootstrapped, or fundraising, are there tactics that you use that differentiate you in a market that's less favorable for women of color founders? Who would like to take that?
I'll jump in.
You're unmuted, so please go for it.
Okay. So, I think that when it comes to this data, for me, it's really, to be quite honest, it's really validating to hear the data, to know the data, because we're all experiencing it. We're all feeling it. We're going to these investor meetings. We're pitching 100 investors when our male counterpart is pitching 30 investors. And so I think with data, there comes power and empowerment, and so by having this data, what it allows you to do is be more prepared. And with more preparation comes more success. And yes, it's unfair and the tables are uneven. But what that means is that because I know this data, now what I can do is I can say, okay, in order to raise this pre-seed round, I know that I have to reach out to at least 300 investors. And even though my male counterpart only has to reach out to 75 or 90, I know what I have to reach out to. And it allows me to set myself up so that I can get the right, Airtable going, put all the data or all the investors in there that I need to talk to, make sure that I'm following up appropriately. And it also helps set your mindset so that when you're on investor 35 or 60 and they're turning you down, you don't feel so much like you're failing, but you feel like, okay, well, I'm almost to that 300 mark. So I think it's really empowering to know that data as female founders and to leverage it to your advantage.
And a couple things that I've been doing. One is I've been prioritizing inbound requests instead of just the cold outreach. A lot of us use these lists, and the list outreach really doesn't go anywhere. But if people are interested enough in what you're doing to reach out to you on LinkedIn or email you, like maybe they have, a higher rate of conversion. And I've just been, super, like April said, like thinking about the data and what it means. So a lot of us are on this app called Clubhouse that received a $100 million valuation, pre-revenue, got a $10 million investment with a few hundred users, right? So a lot of us have been told, hey, what's your revenue? What's your traction? What's your growth? And it has nothing to do with like some of these high-end transactions that we see here in the real world. So I understand fully that it's really not about these metrics that we're all trying to achieve, because all of us have achieved all these metrics. It's really about finding people who believe in you, your tribe, and going from there. So it really, hearing stories like this really enabled me to separate like what I'm doing from, expectations of different people.
Right. And I would just add to that, this is, like April said, it's very, it's just affirming, but there's something we can do about it, right? So, when we first went to our SBA loan, we had to have tons of, perfect stellar credit, had, several co-signers on it. And as I got more mature in this process, I realized that a lot of folks didn't have to go through those hoops that we did. And so I think just having the information available is helpful. Not that it makes it right, but at least you know what you're getting into. And then secondly, as you become wiser and more networked and have more resources, then you can start pushing back on some things. Like when we sign leases, I'm not tying my house to that lease. I know y'all don't, that's not a requirement, and so I think sometimes, that we just don't know a lot of information. I think that also, it can be a challenge when you don't know what you don't know. And so by, making mistakes and then talking to other folks like, hey, when you signed that lease for that new building, what did you do? And they're like, I didn't do, I just signed the lease. I'm like, having that access to that information is very helpful. So next time I sign a lease, I know what my options should be. And then also just knowing who to work with. Some folks, I can just get a vibe that, yeah, no, I'm not going to work with you. That's not going to work out. That's going to be a waste of my time. And so I think we just also have to be kind of discriminating against like, understanding, there are certain people that are going to work with us and help and be our advocates. And then some folks aren't. And the quicker you're able to discern between the yes and the no's and the R's and the ain'ts, it's going to help you accelerate your progress.
You bring up a great point, and we're getting several questions about partnerships. And this is something that I sing from the mountaintop as well, in terms of leveraging partnerships with other woman-led businesses and other businesses that can provide mentorship, collaboration opportunities, and pathways to revenue. So to start, getting timely access to the right partnerships and specific resources can be a powerful way to accelerate business growth and increase your presence in your industry. So who am I going to ask? Actually, I'll ask Roshana. Tell us about a partnership or resource that you gained access to that helped your business early in its development and accelerated your growth.
We have so many partnerships, over 60, but one of the partners that was really helpful was that with Hello Alice. Enricher was actually the very first community on Hello Alice that was created. And they have been doing a great job at sending out information about our programming that gets like hundreds of people through our doors. So that's one of the ones that have been super helpful. But beyond organizations that serve women-led businesses, there's other partnerships like equipment partnerships and swag partnerships. Essentially anything that your business needs like can be a potential avenue for partners. And I definitely suggest like thinking about all the possibilities out there when seeking partnerships.
Excellent. Rima, April, any leveraged partnerships that you think have helped your business significantly?
Yeah, so we're super early stage. We're a little bit over a year old, so I speak from a different vantage point. I'm probably a beneficiary of a lot of the advice you're hearing from this panel, but two of the main important partnerships that we've had are the DeVink Accelerator that you see on the top right corner, as well as the Desai Accelerator. And so we've had the privilege of being in two accelerators this year. And I think to Roshana's point, they really, because the people that we're working with really understand our business and obviously are on board with our mission and understand our problem, they're able to then connect us with people who can help us. And so with both accelerators combined, we've had 5 new mentors that we meet with every week, and they've just been so pivotal in transforming our growth week by week. And so I think it speaks to that point of, getting your word out there, getting your message out there into certain groups, and those groups kind of working each other and referring opportunities your way that help your business.
Thank you for catching that. Perfect example of the power of partnerships and collaborating with women. They will make sure that you're not talking while on mute. So we are getting so many questions in the Q&A section, understandably so. You're just sharing so many incredible insights. And so a question from Brooke is, what mindset do you love to hold on to in your work? Zawadi, I'd love for you to answer that question.
Yeah, for me, one of our values that we have at the company is nothing's impossible. So that's for me, that's my mindset. We've had several different obstacles and hurdles from, one of our clinics flooding during Hurricane Harvey, to, of course, this COVID situation. And so we just have a mantra at the team. And whenever we feel like there's just this huge task at hand, and sometimes we feel overwhelmed, first of all, it's great to have a team because no one's up all the time. I have 2 other partners, and we pray together once a week, and you can just kind of feel like who's going through that week. And so our thing is like nothing's impossible. So we get each other back into a vibe, into a flow. So that's one of the things that's our mantra.
Anyone else on the founder mindset?
It's super important. And this year I really leaned in. I knew I had all these tumors that I had to get removed. So I was like, number one thing this year is like mindset and understanding that everything's going to work out for me, and having like a direction and faith in me achieving whatever my goals were was of the utmost importance. So what I started doing is listening to books, and I do this for 3 to 4 hours every day still. So books such as Power versus Force, The Power of Now, Think and Grow Rich, How to Be Your Own Best Friend, Reality Transurfing. Like, I listen to them over and over again about the correct mindset to life and being an entrepreneur. And whenever I get frustrated or have a question about what my next strategic move is, I listen until I get the sign, and then I move forward. And that's something I changed drastically this year that has helped me tremendously.
That is fantastic. Thank you both for sharing that. Next question comes from Tamisha, and anyone can answer this one. She asks, if you were pitching Beyonce on a partnership, how would you reach out to her and her team first? April, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I'll throw my idea out there. So my thought, this also goes in with founder mindset, is that nobody is impossible to reach, period. You can get to anybody, and you just have to figure out how. You got to get scrappy, and you got to get very comfortable with making yourself uncomfortable and feeling almost annoying. You have to be okay with that, and so what I would honestly do is I would find every channel ever that she has access to, and I would start reaching out at a very ground level. I would start attending events. And right now you can't go in person, but there are going to be online events. There are going to be ways that she has a team member that's hosting virtual things. And so you have to get very, very scrappy, start with the bigger picture, start with her website, start with her Instagram, but then start narrowing down of who actually operates her business and work your way from the top down and the bottom up. But I really think the starting point is knowing that no one is impossible to get in touch with. And people at that level, actually, when they see you with that sort of fire and desire, they want to open up and they want to actually reach back and help.
April, it sounds like you've done this a couple of times. Give us an example. What worked for you? Because I have a very quick paragraph in your playbook.
Yeah, well, so I just, I dive into opportunity when it appears. So last year, 2019, Mark Cuban was at Twitter House, and he went over to Bob's Steakhouse after. I got a text message from my partner that Mark Cuban was at Bob's. I was not prepared. I had just got done on a 5-mile run, was very sweaty, but I went straight over to Bob's, and I walked right up to Mark Cuban and I said, I have 3 questions that I need to ask you, and then I'll leave you alone. And he very graciously said, have a seat. And instead of telling me to leave after my 3 questions, he actually asked me 15 more questions about my business. And so for me, it's really about anytime you see a small, tiny opportunity, like you just fiercely jump at it, because that's your one shot,
And women of color are resilient. We will find a way. I love that. That's such a good example. Thank you. This comes from an ally and male colleague, Kobla. How do you ensure that allies support you fully and also don't stand in your way as you continue to rise?
I can take this. I think this applies to male allies as well as allies in different identity groups when it comes to race or any other, targeted identity. I think listening, and this is advice that I take as well as give, but I just think like listening and not having to experience or expect to experience the same thing as people to just accept their reality as truth. Listening to that statistic, it's like affirming, and it sucks that it has to be affirming, because like we've all said, we've experienced that level of rejection or feeling like we're not good enough when we're pitching, when in reality it's just implicit bias at play. And I think a big role that allies can play is just believe people when they tell you what their experiences are, and not have to justify, those stories with facts or numbers to legitimize them. So yeah, just in summary, listen and understand that you might not understand ever what someone else could experience.
I wanted to add on to that. I would say put your money where your heart is. So at Enricher, we ran this All Rise Factory program, and Handsome April was one of the companies. And we got so many people who wanted to share what we're doing and like and comment. But what April needed was money. She needs money to grow her business. You have to go beyond being an ally who says what you're doing is cool and awesome, and I'll post about it on social media. Have a track record where you're giving women who look like us capital, or investing in us, or buying our products. Like, put your money where your heart is, period.
Hard stop and all the snaps. Thank you both for that. Last question before our wrap-up question is, can you provide an example of a successful partnership agreement, and what did each party walk away with? Zawadi, you mentioned some strategic partnerships early on and still developing those. So does something come to mind when you hear that question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the partnership agreements, like say, for instance, the one I mentioned with the health plan that had the grant funding, I think with any partnership agreement, you have to outline up front, the roles of each party and the expectations of each party. I think all too often, everyone gets excited about a potential partnership, but the T's and the I's and everything isn't taken care of on paper. And so I, would encourage anyone that's going into any type of partnership, if it's informal or formal, even if it's informal, to have something in writing, even if it's an email, because sometimes things get lost in translation when you're talking, but when you write it down on paper, it's like, well, that's not what I meant. And so, even if it's just sending someone an email and saying this is what I think we agreed to. Are you in alignment? That will help solve a lot of drama down the road. And so, again, I just encourage you, to do that, because even with them, with the partnership, they gave us the grant funds, but it was over a period of time, and we had to hit certain metrics and had to see X amount of patients in order for them to justify writing the amount off. So it was very clear, this is the amount of money we're giving you, in this time period, if you meet these metrics.
I love that. That's something that we do as well with the mentor method when we're working with our Fortune 500 customers, whether that's bringing me in as an entrepreneur in residence, which I'm currently doing for one of the big 4 consulting companies, or onboarding one of the largest social media platforms in the world as a customer. You always double check agreements and conversations. Shaking hands is no longer viable when money is on the table. That's actually going to be my parting words for this panel. I would love to segue to Roshana, then Rima, Zawadi, and April to share your last pieces of advice in 30 seconds or less before we wrap up this amazing panel.
You know who you are. Focus on that.
Roshana mentioned The Power of Now. I just finished reading that book, and it talks a lot about just being present and being grateful for the present moment. And so just really trying to find whatever it is that you can be grateful for, even when things are super hard and you're trying to be really scrappy about your business.
I would say find your fan club, whether that's family or, a group of women like this. But have a group of people that are going to lift you up, because there's going to be many, many bumps in the road. There's going to be ups and downs. You want to celebrate with people, as well as you want people to be there in your corner when you need it. So find your community, and, you're going to need it.
My advice is there's a fine line between learning how to challenge an investor and stand up for yourself and taking advice. And I think that it's really art to figure out how to receive advice, but still really stand firmly in your ground and stand up for yourself when you know what you're building and what you're doing.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'm applauding from my apartment here in Austin, but this was fantastic. Thank you all so much for sharing your knowledge, your skills, your experiences. I feel inspired and so motivated by all of you being in the trenches with me. So some key takeaways I heard: be married to the problem, not the solution. Be willing to pivot and be a market leader. Trust your gut and leverage the power of other women. This message goes directly to our allies, whether that be allies through race, religion, or gender. It's time to put your money where your heart is. You have 5 examples of investable, high growth companies right in front of you via this panel, and we're only 1 iota of what's available in Austin and globally. So I encourage you to open up your hearts, your wallets, your networks, provide mentorship, and also continue believing in the power of investing in women of color. Thank you to our sponsors, Bumble, as part of their DivInc Startup Sistas initiative, and thank you to Preston and the DivInc team for hosting us. I'm Janice Omedeki, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
Bye. Thank you.
It's out of that one. Nothing is impossible. Develop a founder's mindset. Get scrappy, and I always use this one as well. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. find your tribe, find your fan club. I mean, I could go on, but wow, a very engaging panel. And I thank all of the ladies for that. Now, it's nearly 3:05 p.m. We have an opportunity, one of two opportunities. You are able to go back into the networking world, again, grow and curate that network, and or you can take a short break for 10 minutes. When we come back, we're going to have yet another really cool activity that I guarantee you will find very interesting. So we'll see you in 10.